Alright guys, welcome back to another one of our tutorials. This one's going to be an overview of cell structures and functions. This is your first tutorial in Unit 3. Okay, so for this section, on page 4, they've got a timeline for you to look at if you like. And remember, I don't care if you know the scientists' names or when they discovered it and all that jazz. I really only care that you understand the concepts. So I'm going to skip it, but feel free to look over it if you like. One thing to keep in mind for this section is you do need to remember your differences between pro and eukaryotes. Okay, so we went over them last time and all that jazz. Here's all of them again. So just remember the difference. The main difference was that membrane-bound organelles, right? That shows up in eukaryotes. So it's like bags that are easily compartmentalized inside of a larger box, whereas this one's just a box of stuff. All right. So just keep that in mind for this particular chapter. All right. Page 5 starts off by introducing that cells are on all living things, etc., all sorts of wonderful things. So we're going to move on to page 6, and we're going to take a look at the basic parts of cells. Now, every cell has a bunch of different things, and there are a couple of different kinds of cells. We know about eukaryotic and prokaryotic, but there are also animal versus plant cells. So I'll use I'm going to use brown for animal cells, and is this green? What is this? That's not green. And green for plant cells, just for sake of argument later on. So let's go ahead and move on to page 7. Oh, cool. So page 7 and let's see, probably page 9. Okay, page 7 and 8 are pretty much just a review of prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And then page 9 goes over what they both have in common. So again, you can refer back to the notes from our last lesson. Okay, if you need them, they're on our last lesson. Feel free to click on that video and check it out. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to page 10. Okay, they're talking about eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotes are complex, so we know that the eukaryotes are the more complex ones. They're different. They have more stuff in them. And so we're going to talk about the different organelles and what each organelle does. I'm hoping they have like a whole page dedicated to each organelle, but let's see. All right, they're going to start with the nucleus. So plant cells and animal cells both have a nucleus. So brown for animal, green for plant. We're going to use like this blue for animals. All right, or I'm sorry, for both. Actually, let's use purple for both. All right, so both of them have a nucleus. Remember that prokaryotes don't have a membrane-bound nucleus. They still have what's called a nucleoid, but they don't have a nucleus. Okay, so actually the purple's kind of light, so let me switch up. Let me go with this is black marker. Alright, so you guys can see that one a little bit better. So nucleus, and this is just the brain of a cell. Okay, so this is the brain of the cell. It pretty much controls everything, and both plant and animal cells have them, and they're in prokaryotes, kind of, but it's not as membrane bound. Okay, this is where your genetic material is kept. Alright, so it carries genetic material, it is the brain, it controls pretty much everything. So the nucleus is a big deal. Most people know about it. That's that brain looking part inside of a cell. Okay? Yeah, so that's page 12. Page 13, we're going to talk about, it looks like ribosomes. All right, let's talk about ribosomes. Ribosomes are in both plant and animal cells. All right, so here's nucleus. Let's talk about ribosomes. I'll put them over here. Ribosomes. So ribosomes, they are made up of DNA, and what they do is they form proteins. They form proteins. So that's their main job. Whenever you see a question about ribosomes, they just make proteins. That's like their main thing. All right. If they do nothing else, that's what they do. Let's go ahead and see if they say anything. So they connect amino acids together. Remember, amino acids are the bases of proteins. And yeah. Cool. We're going to talk about ribosomes with another thing in a little while once we get to the endoplasmic reticulum, and it looks like we're talking about it now. Good. So endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum. Plasmic reticulum. Plasmic reticulum. Alright, reticulum. This can actually be shortened to the ER. Alright, so the endoplasmic reticulum is often referred to as the ER. And there are two types of the endoplasmic reticulum. There's smooth ER, which, by the way, has no proteins, and there's rough ER, and it has proteins embedded into the wall. So it's called rough because when you look at it, it looks like there are little dots inside of the wall. So like here's an endoplasmic reticulum, kind of. Something like that. And an endoplasmic reticulum that's rough would look like this. So a rough ER would just have a bunch of little ribosomes connected all over it. Okay, so it's all dotted and spotted. So it looks rough, right? A smooth ER would not have this. So the rough ER builds proteins, all right? So that's what it builds, and it has ribosomes. So it has this is no ribosomes. All right, so it has no ribosomes, and the rough ER creates proteins through the ribosomes. And that's hard to see, but you get the idea. So rough ER has ribosomes. Smooth ER does not have ribosomes. Okay, smooth ER make fats or lipids. So you can think of these as opposites. Okay, so the rough ER proteins. All right, smooth ER lipids. All right, or fats. If it makes it easier to remember, just remember they're fats. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. By the way, the ER is normally like right outside of the nucleus. So like here's the nucleus or something like that. The rough ER is gonna like circle around it. That's how it looks inside of the cell. So the thing that's like right up next to the nucleus is probably gonna be the endoplasmic reticulum, and it should be rough. It should have protein creators. All right. So now we're going to talk about the Golgi apparatus. You know, this is getting boring all in one color, so I'm just going to start randomly changing the colors between these other ones that I have because I can. So the Golgi bodies are normally blue in diagrams, maybe purple, but Golgi bodies. All right. So Golgi bodies look a lot like rough ER, but they look a little bit more like this. They have like little something like that. So they look a lot like the rough ER, but it's not going to be right against the nucleus. So the nucleus would probably be like over here or something like that. And then of course it'll have the ER attached to it or whatever it is. So this would be a Golgi body. All right, so that's a Golgi body. And what Golgi bodies are important for is they're package centers. So this is a packaging center. All it does is it packages materials, packages stuff. All right, so basically if your body eats something, if your body drinks something, if your body produces something, if your cell is, I don't know, if your cell has waste materials or whatever else, it's just going to package this stuff. Or like if you're producing oxygen, it's going to package all the stuff, package the energy, package the oxygen, water, or whatever, and it's going to send it other places. So this is like the mailman of the cell. So if you think of the nucleus as like the brain, ribosomes are going to essentially create products. So they form proteins. So ribosomes are kind of like the these are like the assembly line people. They make stuff, put stuff together, right? And then the ER, has these. So this is kind of like the factory that has all the assembly line people. So the rough ER has all the assembly line people in it. The Golgi bodies are going to package all the stuff that these guys make, and they're going to move it elsewhere. Okay, so this is like the mailman. So that's Golgi bodies. Let's see if they say anything else. No. So let's go ahead and move on to page 17. All right, lysosomes are kind of like lysosomes are weird because there's no like really good analogy for them, but they break things up. So to lyse literally means to burst. All right, but lysosomes break things down. All right, that's their job. They essentially are like the garbage men, break down stuff. Garbage men. So anytime your body eats food and your cells absorb it or whatever else, maybe you just have a virus or something like that, these lysosomes are going to be responsible for breaking down the food or breaking down the garbage. Okay, so basically you'll have something that shows up inside of here, and here's your little lysosomes are little circles, by the way, and you've got stuff inside of here. The lysosome will break up that stuff so that you end up with just like little stuff dust. Okay, so lysosomes break stuff down. The way I memorized it when I was a kid, I don't know why, but I always saw the like ly, and I thought like limes. So limes are acidic, so they break things down. I don't know if that'll help you guys, but that is the idea. All right, so there's lysosomes. We're gonna go ahead and move on. And we're talking about vacuoles. So vacuoles are also quite. Let's see. I need another color. Does this kind of purple work? No. It's purple. All right. So remember that vacuoles now. Vacuole is just a storage bag. That's all it is. This is storage. It has literally no other job than storing things. In a plant, it's going to have a very large vacuole because you got to store all that. What do plants store? Like, what is it that they gather? Water. So you're exactly right. We're just going to have a bunch of water in a bag. That's what these vacuoles are. But in plant cells, they have one massive bag. We have a lot of little vacuoles, and they carry all sorts of stuff. But plant cells definitely have a really large bag, and it's all going to be filled with water. So this is just storage bags. That's all it is. You can think of this as like what the Golgi body, whenever it packages stuff and sends them off, you'll see vacuoles coming off of the Golgi body, that kind of thing. So these are the actual packages themselves. These are the packages. All right. Vacuoles again are circles. That's really all they are. All right. So that's vacuoles. Let's take a look. What else? Mitochondrion. Okay, this is probably one of the more important ones that you're gonna have to memorize. So mitochondria. Okay, so mitochondria are very, very important. The words you're going to see most often related to these is the powerhouse of the cell. This is essentially the battery. Okay, so this is a battery. All it does is creates energy. That is its main job. It has a double-layered membrane, so it's double-layered. It's actually the most specific and unusual organelle, in my opinion, to study. So it's a double-layered membrane. It produces energy, so it's a powerhouse. It's a battery. It produces energy. Double-layered membrane. Has lots of folds, inner folds. They're called cisternae, but I don't see that in your notes, so I'm not going to worry about them right now. But yeah, so lots of inner folds. Looks kind of like this. So remember, it's like a double-layered membrane, so there's going to be a second layer in here. And then you've got folds like crazy, okay? You guys have probably seen those in cells, but these are the batteries of the cell. They do what's called cell respiration. It produces ATP, so these create a whole lot of energy. Also, these things house their own DNA. So they're one of the few things that do that. Anything that produces energy, house their own DNA, will do that. So in plant cells, you have the equivalent. So plant cells have something very similar to mitochondria. They have mitochondria as well, but they also have chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are what's the cause of photosynthesis. So these two things, the chloroplasts and mitochondria, they both house their own DNA. Why? There are a bunch of reasons for that. That's actually a really, really deep thing. That's why I said these are the most unusual to study, because they have their own DNA. So just keep in mind that mitochondria and the other power-producing organelle, chloroplast, which I hope we go over. If not, I'll just add it to a page. I'll do it now. We might go over this in a bit, but I'll just skip the page if I notice that I run into it. But chloroplasts are also powerhouses, but you're going to see the word photosynthesis. That's what they do. They do photosynthesis. All right. They also house their own DNA. By the way, these things only show up in plant cells. Only in plants. Now, for purposes of your bio class, this is true, especially on EOC and whatnot. So I want you to know that they are only in plants. But to be honest with you, we found chloroplasts in these weird fungi that are hard to classify as fungi, and several other things. So that there are some things that are not plants that do photosynthesis. We're just not going to worry about it too much right now. All right. So for the sake of your test, only plants have chloroplasts. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. Oh, they talk about chloroplasts on the next page. Just kidding. Sorry about that. Also has this double membrane. Forgot to mention that kind of thing. All right, double membrane produces energy. all that jazz. So this and this are very, very similar. You'll notice the mitochondria and chloroplast. I wrote a lot of the same things. They are very, very similar. They just do slightly different things. This is responsible for cell respiration. This is photosynthesis. That's really their main difference. All right, and then they talk about the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton actually has a lot of different parts in it. I'm not going to write this one, but the cytoskeleton, we'll add this one, whatever. We'll add it in brown. So cytoskeleton is really just the structure. That's all it is. All right. So this would be like the buildings of a city or the walls of a house. So it's just construction. It is structure. That's all it is. Cytoskeleton provides a shape. It also protects the cell, obviously, so it's not so easy to just crush cells and whatnot. They have a cytoskeleton. All right. So that's what that is. Let's go to page 22. They're going to have you match things. I'll have you go ahead and do that. 23. All right, 23 describes the differences between animals and plant cells, some of them. So let's talk about it. And I'm actually going to talk about it in a little more detail than they do on this page. They might continue on a 24, but whatever. So I told you earlier I was going to use green and brown. Brown for animals. So here are animals. And green for plants. So here are plants. Oh, you guys can't see any of that. Okay, there you go. So plants and animals. All right. So with animals, you're going to have small vacuoles. So that is the first part. We talked about this earlier, so I want to get it out of the way now. Small vacuoles. All right. But in plants, you're going to see these words normally together. It's going to say large, central, vacuole. And remember, all this is in charge of is storing water. So this is storing water. Okay, that's its main job. Next, in animal cells, you're going to see something called a... Ooh, they don't include it on here. But... let's see. Alright, I won't include it on here either. There's actually something that has to do with, like, reproduction that only... Well, whatever. So we're going to ignore that because they don't have it on their list. I don't want to teach you guys extra things if you guys don't need to know. So this is the main part. Animal cells also have a lot of mitochondria. Alright, plant cells don't have quite as many. They also, in animal cells, have a lot of ribosomes. Again, that doesn't mean that plant cells don't have ribosomes or mitochondria. It just means they have significantly less. Okay? But plants do have other things. So they have a cell wall. Oh gosh. I messed up that C. Cell wall. And you guys have to keep in mind, cell wall is just going to be the part of the cell that's really hard. So that's why a lot of plants are crispy or, harder. So like our skin's a little, soft and whatnot. Like you can move it around and all that jazz. But a plant, you can often end up breaking it and that kind of thing. It's a lot harder. Trees are super, super hard because they have, really, really thick cell walls, that kind of thing. Okay, so we don't have a cell wall. Further, we don't have chloroplasts. Now, while they have mitochondria, we definitely don't do photosynthesis as animals. Okay, so we don't have those either. These are the main things. I don't want to include. I'm going to include it just because. So this isn't included into your tutorial, but for the last EOC, it was definitely a standardized fact that animals have lysosomes and plants don't. That's not really true. We found a lot of plants with lysosomes, but I think this shows up on your EOC as something animals have and plants don't. Don't quote me on that one because they might have changed it for this EOC. Like I said, recent developments have shown that we definitely have plants with lysosomes. So maybe we ignore it, but I want to make it known just in case you see it on your EOC. I don't want you to be blindsided for no reason. Okay. So if you ever see something that says like animal cells have what that plant cells don't, and lysosomes is one of the answers, that's probably what they're going for. Okay, because plant cells have pretty much everything that animal cells have. Pretty much. There are just two exceptions. I'm only going to talk about lysosomes because I think that showed up on the last EOC. So that is page 23. Let's go ahead and move on to page 24. Alright, and then it talks about the different microscopy that they use. I don't really care about this. We've talked about microscopes way back in like Unit 1, somewhere in there. It talks about like light microscopes and transmission electron, scanning electron microscopes. We've talked about all of these. So you can take a look at page 24 to review microscopes if you like. I'm going to go ahead and move on to page 25, and it's probably honestly it. This chapter is fairly simple. It really is just memorizing structures and functions. So yeah, it has an activity and probably a summary on the next couple of pages. So I'm just going to summarize all the different things that may or may not be useful for you. So let's start back here. So remember what these things do. So remember the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Okay, so that's a big deal for this chapter. So if you don't remember, feel free to go back to the last tutorial. They have a lot of differences on their own. So mitochondria, chloroplasts, and then ribosomes are technically made out of RNA, but that's okay. So mitochondria, chloroplasts have their own DNA, and ribosomes are made of DNA, so they kind of have their own. All right. The semi-permeable membrane of a cell, which I didn't go over actually. Let me go over what a semi-permeable membrane is. I'm going to use blue for this one. Works out pretty well with blue. So semi-permeable membrane. What we have is we have our cells, and they don't just let everything in, because if they let everything in, we definitely die, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in our body. So cells are semi-permeable. Semi means partially. Permeable literally just means able to go through. All right, so stuff goes through, able to go through. And so when we're semi-permeable, that means we kind of let some stuff through. All right, so we let water through pretty easily. We let non-polar small molecules through. We don't do so well at letting bigger things go through. Okay, so smaller things do pretty well here. Non-polar things do pretty well here. Water has a little bit of trouble, but it kind of does well here. But everything else often has to go through a bunch of trouble to get through it. But semi-permeable membrane literally means you're not able to go through it. I think we actually go through this in a bigger way later on, so I'm not going to go in detail, but the point is, here's your cell. Here's some water, and then here's some here's like a whatever this is. I don't really know. Maybe that's a virus or something like that. I'm not really sure. But water has some trouble, so one of them might get through, but some of these might bounce off. Go different ways. This green thing though, he's definitely not getting through. It's not going to happen. So water is polar. Remember that. That's why it's having trouble going through. But then you can have some other like really tiny molecules. Just little tiny dots. These things can get through pretty easily. So because they're small and they're non-polar, whatever. But the idea is that not everything can just easily go through. Okay. So that is the idea of a semi-permeable membrane. Don't forget to know the difference between animals and plant cells. Alright, so that's a big deal. Know all those differences. Remember that the endoplasmic reticulum has a rough and smooth ER. They still surround the nucleus, but one produces fats, one produces proteins. Remember the Golgi bodies, all that jazz. And then all of these as well. Basically just know all your cell parts. This lesson isn't really all that long because I literally was just talking about cell parts. So if you got your cell parts down, you'll be okay. Alright, so feel free to pause the video anywhere you need to. I'll go ahead and try and fit them all on the screen real quick so that you can pause them here at the end. But I think you guys should do well in this test. It's not particularly hard, so go ahead and pause now. But yeah, it's not particularly hard, so you should be okay for the most part. There might be one or two questions that trip you guys up, but I think you mostly have it. Alright, so best of luck. Let me know if you guys need anything, and yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next video. Alright, bye.